today, I'm not going to teach. If you want to hear me teach, you can get on the app or the website or listen to last week's, right? There's plenty of stuff you can hear me talk about if you want to go there. But this morning, I have something even better. We have, it's an important day today. This is Sanctity of Life Sunday. Okay, this is Sanctity of Life Sunday. And I just want to let you guys know that there is a battle in our day. I mean, this battle is as old as time, but there's a battle in our day that's raging for the lives of the vulnerable, for the preborn, unborn humans, unborn babies. And, it's important that if you're a father, or if you had a good father, or you want to be a good father, one thing that's really important is that you don't back away from talking about the things that are hard to talk about, right? You make sure that people, your kids, if you're a good father, understand the ways of God, right? And so I'm not your father, but I'm a pastor, and I feel like if we didn't, it's important for us to create space to talk about the sticky things, the things that maybe we want to avoid talking about, but that are so important because of the reality of the battle that's going on. We need to understand what God's perspective is, what His will is, what a champion for life He is. And so that's why we're creating a space today to talk about life. And I want to say this too, again, before I introduce Joe. Some of the stuff might be sensitive for some of you because it may hit really close to home. And I just want to say this. In anything that Joe says, there is no condemnation for you. We've all had different experiences, okay? And we've all fallen short in different ways. That doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about the truth of God, even if those things hit close to home and might be hard to hear. We still need to talk about the truth of God. And so what I want to say is, this is a place of love. God has healing for you. If there's brokenness in your life, if there are sensitive areas in your life, God wants to heal those places in your heart. He loves you so much. And this morning in the Bible reading plan, in the Old Testament reading, 2 Samuel 22, verse 29, it says this. It says that David, it's kind of a song of praise that he's got going there. It says, David says, the Lord is a lamp. The Lord is my lamp, turning my darkness into light. Okay, the Lord turns darkness into light. And if there's a place of hurt or darkness or off limits in your heart, I want you to know, or maybe you have circumstances that, you don't know how to fix. That's a lot of what was happening with David. I just want to say the Lord turns darkness into light. He doesn't just beat you up for the darkness in your life, right? He wants to transform it and change it, okay? So there's grace, there's mercy, there's healing when we come to Christ. And the Lord actually, He doesn't just drive off the darkness. He transforms it into light. So those things that you think might disqualify you, or those things that bring guilt and shame in your life, hey, that's what the Lord wants to transform that into light in your life, okay? He's miraculous. He can do this stuff. Okay, now I want to invite Joe to come up. Joe's the president of Heartbeats, and we've got, Leanna here works for Heartbeats, and Sarah worked for Heartbeats, right? And so we have a lot of Heartbeats connection. Our church supports Heartbeats financially. The micro-church leaders voted on that. And so, hey, this is an important thing to us. It's an important thing to God. And I look forward to hearing what Joe has to say. Let's hear it.
Thanks. Is this on? Can you guys hear me? It's good? Doesn't sound like anything up here. Thank you, Wade. Appreciate that. So as Wade said, my name is Joe Pozzuoli. I am not a hub leader here. As I like to say, I'm just an average lay person. It's an inside joke. I know it would get John Litton to laugh back there. There's not a lot of people who would get it, but all jokes aside, all titles aside, I asked to speak today, and leadership graciously gave me the microphone. And the reason I did ask to speak, as Wade said, is it's Sanctity of Life Sunday. In 1984, Ronald Reagan set the day apart as a way to commemorate the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. Now, every year on the third Sunday in January, pastors and lay people, churches and other organizations come together and just try to bring awareness to the attacks of life that are happening through the abortion industry. When we do this, we just want to try to encourage people to get involved in some way to help protect the unborn, through education, maybe exposing the underside or the underbelly of the abortion industry, or just through various calls to action. One of the easiest ways people can get involved is to support your local pregnancy resource center. So there are about 3,000 of these centers across the country. They are meeting women and families every single day with messages of hope and life. And I am proud to serve on the board of directors at Heartbeats, which is our local pregnancy resource center. We have one center in Newark, one here in Zanesville. And if you are unfamiliar with Heartbeats, we serve the community with the love of Christ. We're a life-affirming pregnancy resource medical center that is serving the community with the love of Christ. And we do this primarily through offering emotional, physical, and spiritual support for those that find themselves in an unplanned pregnancy. But we also serve the community in a lot of other ways too. So we have a talented team of educators that are going into schools and they're teaching about topics like abstinence or how to recognize dating violence or understanding what healthy relationships look like. So we're reaching students with these powerful messages. Once a woman has a baby, the woman and the man, they can continue to come into our centers. They can take courses which can teach them how to be a better parent or just build other additional life skills. Through that learning, we give them points. They can take those points and acquire physical needs by shopping in our boutique at no cost to them. So if they need food or diapers or clothes, we have those resources available. And then also, we have an after-abortion support care ministry. And I have a slide for this. And if you could just leave that up on the screen. Because like Wade said, if you or anyone you know has suffered abortion, there is hope, there is healing, there is grace, there is forgiveness. And our after-abortion support care ministry, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. We have people who are willing to walk with you through that. We have people who are willing to walk with you in that journey of healing and forgiveness. And so that is the information. If you or anyone you know needs to get in contact with someone, it's kind of small on there, but if you want it, I can give it to you after. So I tell you these things because I want you to know how we, and we're just one pregnancy resource center, but how we serve the community. Because you'll hear people say that pro-life people or pregnancy resource centers only care about the baby in the womb, and then once it's born, they don't care. And I want to tell you, that's not true. It's a lie. And last year I stood up here on Sanctity of Life Sunday for a long time, well over my time limit, and I delivered a message called Exposing the Lies. And I do want to take just a couple of minutes and recap at a high level some of those points, because I think it's important for us to understand and know the pro-life position, the pro-life arguments, and how it's grounded in science, reason, logic, and facts. And now you're going to hear me say things like the argument, or the position, or the debate, or the issue. And I just want to I want to take a step back and say, I am not trying to minimize this down to an argument, because it's literally a matter of life and death. There's grave consequences for the child in the womb. So when I call it a position, or I call it an argument, or I call it an issue, I'm not trying to minimize the severity or the impact of what is actually happening. This is a spiritual battle, but it plays itself out in the political realm, and it plays itself out in societal discourse. And so because of that, I'm going to refer to it as that. But again, I want you to know I'm not trying to minimize the severity or the impact. And the pro-life position is very simple, and I have this on a slide. It's very simple, and it can just be summed up that we believe that all innocent human beings are valuable, and they have the right to life. And so we believe that about all human beings, regardless of their size, their level of development, their environment, or their degree of dependency. You see, because all of the reason, all of the facts, all of the logic, all of the science is on the pro-life side in this position. I can actually make the argument and defend it very well without ever appealing to my faith or to God. Now, that does not mean that it's not important to God. That does not mean that it doesn't matter to him. That does not mean that we don't need him in the battle. And I'll talk more about that later, because you and I know that We are made in the image of God. You and I know that we have an enemy who wants to steal, kill, and destroy. But I can make the argument without ever appealing to faith or God. Again, it doesn't mean it's not important to him. It just means that the pro-life position is the most consistent and the most morally correct position in this issue. The pro-life position is the most consistent and the most morally correct position in the issue. See, we know without a shadow of a doubt that a human pregnancy results in a human offspring. We all know that. We know that human life, a new human life, begins at the moment of conception. See, at the moment of conception, egg no longer exists, sperm no longer exists. You have a new, unique, distinct, and whole living human being that will go on to self-direct its own development from embryo to fetus all the way into adulthood. And fetus is just a stop. It's just a stop on the human life cycle. You'll hear things in this argument like my body, my choice. But look, it's not grounded. It's not grounded in science, reason, logic, and facts. You see, because we know when a woman is pregnant, she does not have 4 eyes, 4 ears, 2 mouths, 2 noses, 4 arms, 4 legs, 20 fingers, 20 toes. If she's carrying a male, she does not simultaneously yet temporarily have both sexual reproductive organs. See, we know that there are 2 bodies there, right? So that position, my body, my choice, it's not grounded. All right, you'll hear things like survival outside of the womb or viability. But again, these positions, they're not grounded in science, reason, logic, and fact. In human history, we have never heard of a woman giving birth, then dropping that baby off a couple of days later at its own apartment and saying, "See you at Christmas, son," right? Like, survival outside of the womb, it's not grounded in the science, the reason, the logic, and the fact. You'll hear things like poverty, economics, like you don't want a child to grow up in an abusive household as a way to justify abortion. And look, let's start with the common ground. Nobody wants a kid to grow up in an abusive household. The first 5 years of my life were spent in extreme poverty and in an abusive household. Nobody wants that. But when a child is born and it goes home in 2 days or a day, whenever they release them from the hospital, to an abusive household, nobody in their right mind says, well, we should take that child out and end its life because we don't want it to grow up in an abusive household, right? So when you start looking at logic and you take in these things to its logical conclusion, these positions are not grounded, all right? And so again, on the next slide, just real simple, something that you guys should know, right? It's called SLED. We believe that all human beings are valuable, innocent human beings are valuable, and they have the right to life regardless of their size. Right, so Hayden on the slides is almost 7 feet tall. My middle child, Mara, she's almost 5 feet tall. Right, human beings come in different shapes and sizes. It doesn't determine their value. All right, levels of development. How old is your baby right now? Couple, 3 or 4, 3? So couple of months, right? So my son Judah is 8 years old. I'm 43. Different levels of development. A fetus in the womb is just a different level of human development. It doesn't make a human being more or less valuable, right? Environment, a human being in America versus a human being in Africa, right? Location or environment doesn't make you more or less valuable. Inside the womb, a human being. Outside the womb, a human being. The 8 inches of the birth canal is not a magic portal to value or humanism, okay? All right, the degree of dependency. We know that at various levels of the human life cycle, you will be dependent upon others, right? So a newborn baby may need fed either through breastfeeding or bottle feeding. In the womb, it needs an umbilical cord, right? When we are older, we might need someone to feed us. We might need someone to help bathe us, clothe us. So at different stages of our life cycle, we will have different degrees of dependency. So none of that changes the value of a human being. And so I just say all that. That's a quick, high-level wrap-up. You can check out that talk or talk from someone else. I am not a premier expert in that. There's a lot, I didn't make any of this stuff up. So there's a lot of information that you can use to familiarize yourself with some of these points. So now, I want a show of hands here. Wade talked about the Bible reading plan. Who here is following along on the Bible reading plan? Okay, good amount of hands. Now, who's reading the Old Testament too? Keep those hands up. All right, I think we had less hands. Wade's going to check the tape. You might start getting notifications. Like if you do Duolingo, right, you can get a lot of notifications. Like, read the Old Testament. Okay, so if you've been reading the Old Testament, then a few months ago, we read the book of Judges. You guys remember Judges? All right, there was a guy in there named Samson. So if you're unfamiliar with the story of Samson, I'm going to give you just a quick high-level recap. So first of all, the first thing we should know about Samson is he was set apart in the womb. In Judges 13:5, I've got a slide up here, it says that he was dedicated to God from the womb. So that's very relevant right now, right? God is setting apart humans in the womb to live out a specific purpose. And so Samson was set apart in the womb. He's a Nazarite. His strength comes from his hair. He goes on to lead Israel for 20 years. And mostly against the Philistines. He is a thorn in their side, man. He has given it to them every chance that he gets. And they do not like him. He goes on, he meets a woman named Delilah. And if you don't know anything about Delilah, she's a real treat. All right, let me tell you. Samson could have used some training on understanding what a toxic relationship looks like. Because she goes out and she conspires with his enemies to find the source of his strength and hand him over. And so, Samson, please tell me the source of your strength. And so, he makes something up. He says, you tie me up with 7 fresh bowstrings and that's the source of my strength. So that night, literally that night, he finds himself tied up in the exact same way that he told her. Now look, we don't know really because it doesn't say, but I doubt that he was going around that day telling a bunch of people, you tie me up with 7 fresh bowstrings is the source of my strength. He probably just told her, right? And he finds himself in that situation. Now, it's not the real source of his strength, so he busts out. Oh, Samson, you made a fool of me. Samson, please tell me the source of your strength. And then it's like, oh, well, tie me up with, these types of strings, ropes that have never been used. He finds himself tied up with these types of ropes that have never been used. And it's like everything he's telling her, he finds himself. Now, this isn't the source of his strength. He busts out. Samson, you're making a fool of me. Oh, braid my hair 7 times using this one. Very complicated instructions. He finds himself immediately in that position. Again, it's not the source of his strength. But if you're reading this from the outside, you're starting to have some questions, right? Like, why are you still with this woman? Like, what is going on here, right? And eventually, he comes and he tells her, oh, the source of my strength is in your hair, in my hair. And it's like, dude, what do you think is going to happen here, right? That night, the clippers come out, however they cut hair back then. The source of his strength is zapped. He finds himself captured, tortured. They rake his eyes out. But the whole time, you're reading this millennia later and just thinking, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, how can you not see? How could you ignore all of those signs and yet still continue on that path? And as I was reading that, it just hit me. It's like, how can a civil society support the barbaric practice of abortion? You see, because it's the same story. As clear as we can look from the outside and say Samson was blinded, all the reason, all the facts, all the science, all the data points to the pro-life position being the most consistent and morally correct position in this argument. And yet, in this country alone, not even counting worldwide, every 34 seconds, a baby is killed in the womb. I've been up here for 13 minutes, so 26 babies roughly have been killed in the womb from the time I took the stage. There are entire generations missing. If you think about it, if a child was killed in the womb in 1973 when Roe v. Wade was passed, that child will have no kids, no grandkids, no great-grandkids, no great-great-grandkids. Generations are missing. And we look at this and we say, how? Why? How can we support this? And we see in 2 Corinthians 4:4, right? The God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that he cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. And as I read these, Hayden, you can just pull them up as I read it. All right, and so we start to see a root. See, there's a God of this age, and he's blinding the minds of people. All right, and he can blind the minds of people in a lot of different ways. All right, so we're starting to see a root here. All right, 2 Timothy 2:25-26. Opponents must be gently instructed in the hope that God will grant them repentance, leading them to a knowledge of truth, and that they will come to their senses and escape the trap of the devil who have taken them captive to do his will. So blinding the minds of people, taking them captive to do his will, and we know what his will is. It's to steal, kill, and destroy. We see in Ephesians 6:12, our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm. So we see there's a spiritual battle going on. There are forces of darkness, and that's where our real battle is against them. We know that we are created in his image. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So you see, this is a spiritual battle. And people's minds are being blinded, and they need to come to their senses. And the only way to do that is to appeal to God and to pray that people will come to their senses. Now, you might be saying, well, Joe, you just told me 5 minutes ago that you can make this whole argument and never appeal to your faith or to God. And that's true. I can make the argument. The argument is grounded in science, reason, logic, and fact. But as you can see, we are not just dealing with science, reason, logic, and fact. This is a spiritual battle. And the only way to win a spiritual battle is on a spiritual front. When I was praying about what to speak about, the story of Zacchaeus came to mind. The story of Zacchaeus is not typically one that you would hear on a Sanctity of Life Sunday. If you're not familiar, it's in Luke chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. And Zacchaeus was a chief tax collector. And what that probably just means, he ripped a whole lot of people off. All right? And so Jesus calls out to him, and it says, Jesus is actually chastised for this. He says, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But see, Zacchaeus says, Lord, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay 4 back times that amount. See, the story of Zacchaeus is one of true grace and repentance. We don't know what Jesus said to him. We don't know where his heart was before he met Jesus. We just know that after that encounter, he literally made a 180 and walked in a different direction. And you see, as I am up here right now, as I speak, there are people who are fighting for the right to abortion. There are people having abortions. There are people performing abortions. As I am speaking right now, there are people fighting for the right to abortion, having abortions, and performing abortions. That will someday, I don't know how, I don't know when, but they someday will come to their senses, turn, and walk in a different direction. And they will come to their senses and turn and walk in a different direction. You see, in the pro-life community, we have a saying, and we have a graphic up here, love them both. It is meant to simply convey that in our policy, our positions, and our actions, we should love both the baby in the womb as well as the mother. And I think we do a pretty good job of that. We're not perfect, just like no church is perfect. I think anyone that tells you we don't in our policy and positions fulfill that, it's just a distraction. I think we do a good job, but I actually think there's more. You see, we actually need to love all three. We need to love the baby, we need to love the mother, and we need to love that protester who has the sign that says, my body, my choice. And I'm telling you, man, this is a hard command for me to stand up here and say to you, because when I am in the thick of it, when I am in a conversation, in a dialogue, or consuming content, or anything, where I am seeing somebody who has had their minds blinded and they're not listening to the science, the reason, the logic, and the facts. And when I am in those types of dialogues, I can tell you that my blood is boiling, right? Like my blood pressure is rising, and I'm just like, how can you not see this? And so it's a hard command for me to tell you that we need to love all three, but we do. See, we know in the Word, we are told that love covers a multitude of sins. I've got these up here. We know that love covers over all wrongs. We know that love is the greatest gift. And we know that Jesus told us that we need to love our enemies and we need to pray for those who persecute us. So it's a hard command that I give you today, but it's not my command. It's Jesus' command. And so we need to love all three. And so as a church body, I have 2 calls to action for you. Just 2. They're pretty simple. The first is to be knowledgeable. Okay? You should be a little bit knowledgeable. You should understand the actual pro-life position. You should understand some of the nuances. You should also know what's going on in the battle. I have some websites up here. These are news sites that I consume regularly. The second screenshot is from our Heartbeats newsletter. It explains some of the bills in Ohio that have passed that are now law, that are pro-life laws. You should know some of these things. You should know what's going on. You see, did you know that there are currently about a dozen pro-life activists who are in federal prison because they were protesting at an abortion clinic? Do you know that? You should know these things, okay? That the current administration on its way out tomorrow, thankfully, and I can say that because I'm a lay person, weaponized the DOJ and the FBI, literally raided homes, brought them out in cuffs in front of their children for protesting abortion, trying to protect unborn lives. That could be anyone you know. So you should know those things. Now, we're hoping President Trump pardons them literally on day one, tomorrow. But you should know these things, and you'll get this from being knowledgeable. Do you know the story of Amber Thurman? Amber Thurman is a tragic, tragic story, and this was brought up a lot in the election, okay? The recent presidential election. You had Vice President Kamala Harris, you had Democratic surrogates, you had ABC, NBC, USA Today, WAPO, the New York Times, all of them bringing up her tragic story, which she died in 2022, by the way, but it became a political issue. But see, if you don't know what really happened, then you can find yourself led astray. You see, Amber Thurman's a tragic case. She lost her life. She was a mother in Georgia. She was carrying twins. Georgia has heartbeat laws in place, so she could not get an abortion. She drives to North Carolina. She was supposed to get a D&C. That's a type of abortion. I'm not going to go into the details of what that is. She got there late, so instead they just gave her the abortion pill. Never did an ultrasound to confirm she was carrying twins or how far along she was. Those are two medical malpractice issues right there. She drives back to her home state in Georgia. See, this is where Wade said it might get a little graphic. Like, you got to know what the abortion pill does. It works in two stages. The first is it starves the fetus out. That's how it ends its life. Okay? The second is it causes delivery. It did what it was supposed to do on the first part, but she didn't fully deliver. And so she ends up developing sepsis, and she goes into the ER, into the hospital in her home state of Georgia, and these doctors let her sit for 20 hours before they gave her before they attempted the life-saving care she needed, and she died on the operating table from the sepsis. See, she didn't die because of pro-life laws. She died because of medical malpractice. But why did the doctors not do anything? Because the abortion industry does what the abortion industry did what the abortion industry does. And when this pro-life laws were making its way through through legislation in Georgia, they dumped tens of millions of dollars into campaigns with misinformation, very similar to what they did in Ohio here a couple of years ago. And they made claims like, well, if this goes into effect, you won't be able to get miscarriage care, or doctors won't be able to perform life-saving care on a mother. None of that is true. None of that is true. That law and no pro-life law in the books limits miscarriage care or life-saving care for the mother. But you see, these doctors, they're people. They consume media just like you and I. So they don't want to go to jail, so they didn't know what to do. So Amber Thurman tragically died. But now, if you don't know exactly what happened, if you only consumed the mainstream media sources and not dug a little deeper, you might believe what they told you. Pro-life laws killed this woman. And then you might go out and vote to put an amendment in our Constitution to legalize abortion. Now, I'm not saying you personally did that, but in Ohio, it's enshrined in the state constitution because of misinformation like this. And so the call to action is like to be knowledgeable of these things, okay? The second call to action is prayer. Because this is a spiritual battle and we need everybody in it, okay? And so you need to pray for an awakening. You need to pray for hearts and minds to be changed. You got to pray for truth and life to break through. You've got to pray against the forces of darkness. You got to pray for the veil to be lifted and people to come to their senses. That is what we need. On top of that, for anybody who has had an abortion, knows somebody that had an abortion, participated in any way, we need to pray for healing. You need to pray for forgiveness. You need to pray for grace for them. But we need to pray that everybody would come to their senses and turn and walk in the other direction in the same way that Zacchaeus did. Because as I look out here, I see a lot of people who are carrying the Spirit of God, right? We are spirit carriers. And if those who are not carrying the Spirit, or those who are carrying the Spirit are not in the battle, even just at a basic level of prayer, we will not and cannot end abortion in this country. So we're asking you to join us, to be knowledgeable and to be prayerful, right? We're not asking for all of your time, attention, to ignore other things that are near and dear to your heart that God has laid on your heart. We're not asking for all of your money, right? We're just asking that you be knowledgeable and be prayerful, okay? Because we need you in this battle. We need you. We need all of you to be calling on our Father in heaven so that people will come to their senses and turn and walk in the other direction. That's the call to action today. Amen? Amen. All right.